Hi folks, David Jameson here, editor of conta.co.uk, bringing you just another wee quick chat on Scottish politics, 5 weeks out, I think, from COP26. And how are preparations going in Scotland? Not particularly well, I'd say. This is a strange period because we're just a few weeks into a new coalition or cooperation government involving the Scottish Greens and the SNP. We're just weeks away from COP26, the biggest international environmental beano that has ever taken place in Scotland, or possibly the UK for that matter. Certainly all the politicians are saying that it's the most important, our last best chance and all this stuff to save the planet. I have to say, I'm not sure that any of these sorts of international meetings are really bringing about the necessary solutions. They're typically dominated by big business and big state power. And all of their approaches to dealing with the global warming and environmental destruction tend to, at the very best, draw together their strategic interests and their profit-making interests with the solutions that they proffer. So it's always worth, I think, turning quite a critical eye to those developments. But here in Scotland, there have been some peculiar, heated debates outside, mostly it must be said, of official political circles about the complete lack of activity on behalf of domestic elites and principally the government. So a big focus of this has been the absolutely peculiar debacle of a national energy company. To give you a quick history of this idea, I think first in 2016, in the SNP's manifesto for the elections, Scottish elections that year, this idea first cropped up of a national energy company. I know that the left-wing think tank Commonweal have done a lot of work on this, but as far as I know, according to them, they didn't particularly lobby the SNP on this. It was simply picked up as, I think, as we'll go on to see, as a kind of popular slogan or a dynamic sounding slogan for what the SNP were going to do in power. In 2017, at the SNP's conference, Nicola Sturgeon unveiled this policy as the big kind of, conference giveaway to buy some headlines in the papers the next day to get the party faithful a bit buoyed up. And she was cheered to the rafters by SNP delegates. That was in 2017, when she declared that a national energy company, which crucially would control energy prices for those living in energy poverty, so it would balance the energy market, famously dominated by big corporate entities, and would provide this alternative for Scotland, and would also, integrate renewable energy to bring about this green energy revolution that we're always hearing about in Scotland, but which is permanently stillborn from the looks of things. So that was in 2017, and she said that this would be introduced by the end of that term of Parliament, which would have been in 2021. Now, obviously, it didn't materialise before 2021, and then in recent weeks, it was quietly dropped. Nicola Sturgeon said instead there would be some kind of agency, some kind of green energy agency. And the thinking on this, it seems, is that this organisation will advise and consult local authorities and so on how to make this transition to green energy. But it's obviously a much less substantial plan than an actual nationalised energy corporation with the kind of social and energy reach that this initial proposal had. A few days, like 3 days after Nicola Sturgeon announced that an NEC was off the table, it was voted for again at SNP conference. And the delegates at that conference, I was there reporting for another publication, but the delegates of that conference used the same arguments again, energy poverty, we need to kind of rev up this green transition, and so on. And it was voted for by delegates overwhelmingly. But that's no reason to think that this is Scottish government policy now, just because it's SNP policy. There's no real relationship between those things. Quite a lot of things are wanted by SNP members, and it never makes it into the government's prospectus. So that seems to be ditched, despite the fact that delegates want it. But the Scottish Greens still said they wanted this. And just a few months ago, in June, on the Greens website, they put out a piece of press relations saying that a national energy company was desperately needed. The Green figure who was proposing this was Lorna Slater, a co-leader of the Greens and now a minister in the Scottish government. Fast forward a few months, and Scottish Labour tried to pass an amendment which would introduce this national energy company, and the same Lorna Slater knocked it down by reading from like a Scottish government briefing paper. Coming across as completely complacent, totally disinterested. It's just sort of robotic, reading off in the middle of Parliament, just reading off this briefing paper about how, and it was all, buzz phrases about how this energy agency was what was needed. To reiterate, this agency, it's going to be an office, right? That's what this is going to be. It's going to be an office somewhere in Edinburgh, say, with a few staff in it, looking at databases and phoning up local councils and stuff like that. That's what we're talking about. This is what a lot of the Scottish Government's reforms amount to these days. Do you remember that National Care Service, right? Which is obviously designed to sound like the National Health Service, but will be absolutely nothing of the sort. If you look into it, the National Care Service is going to be, it's going to be like an office where they're going to sort of oversee the existing corporate care sector. With what power to intervene, it's completely unclear. But they're going to basically be applying, moral pressure on these corporate care giants that made a complete pig's ear of the pandemic, resulting in considerable loss of life in our care homes. And they're going to be sort of, persuading them to up their game in some way. This is what Scottish politics looks like in the era of the sort of death of reformism. This isn't tinkering. We need a different word for this. These just completely cosmetic, policy names without any policy substance behind them. All these national institutions getting set up, and they're nothing but an office with a few people in them, tinkering about in existing markets. The complete opposite of any meaningful response to the challenge of climate change and a just transition. You're going to do a just transition by recruiting a few PR people and a few office workers to tinker around in existing markets. That's precisely the thing that is going to lead to this ongoing complacency and the loss of our natural assets to foreign corporations, and all this kind of stuff. I have to say, I feel like it's been a really bad launch for this coalition government or cooperation government or whatever we're calling it. There have already been so many kind of wee scandals around it. The Greens have just been absorbed in a matter of weeks. As I think I've said in one of these videos before, we shouldn't be remotely surprised by that. They voted for all the Scottish government's budgets for 5 years running. They were already substantively co-opted. That was already there. And in a sense, this cooperation deal, the coalition, just made that sort of semi-official, though the Greens still tried to say, we're independent in some way or another. Well, at the moment, they don't look very independent. And I just feel like if there was going to be big moves made on this kind of stuff, on the just transition and a green energy revolution and all these buzz phrases, it would be happening right now. It would be happening now in the run up to COP26, in the early months of the new government. And instead, it's just in an absolutely parlous state. It just looks terrible. This situation, combined with what's going on in the UK with the Labour Party, where if you've been following it, Keir Starmer is going to reintroduce the old voting system at Labour conferences to carve out the membership and avoid another Corbyn and so on. Just to me confirms a view that, I mean, our democratic institutions, whether it's London or it's Edinburgh, are totally hollowed out, totally elitist, totally aloof. Like, the Greens' behaviour in and out of the Parliament, apart from anything else, is ridiculous. Like, I mean, to have read off that briefing paper and then the next day there are Green MSPs on social media saying, well, we didn't want a national energy company, we wanted local energy companies. And this agency, this office is going to achieve this, apparently. It's contempt at this point. It's contempt for democracy. It's contempt for their own party members. Apart, way beyond the voters or the country or whatever. This is contempt. I mean, these are people who have been in that parliament, a lot of them now, quite a long time, and really feel like they deserve to be in there. And that any criticism made of them is just naturally invalid. It's made by troublemakers, whether they be in the media or in opposition parties or just in the general public. There's a real feeling of entitlement. And I just don't see a lot of worth emerging from the high politics sphere. And I noticed that rail unions were outside Butte House today. I think we need more of that. I think we need more targeting of those in official positions of power for protest, civil disobedience, joining up stuff that's emerging across society. I think with the constricted labour supply, I think this kind of stuff is what's needed, because from official politics, so-called, like, it's just an absolute wasteland at this point, and we need to organise some sort of alternative independently of it, because it's a real mess. Anyway, those are just some really quick thoughts. I don't claim for my insights to be comprehensive, or I'm afraid I can't bring you all the answers to Scotland and the world's problems. But if you thought that was useful, do say so below. If you think there's something else that needs to be said, say that, or send on your thoughts to editor@conto.co.uk. Or if you think this is total mince, say that as well. Please do, though, subscribe to this YouTube channel, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon.